to the shoulder, and then move to the back shoulder corner, click to start, and slide down to the notch, click to end. I'm not going to go past the notch. And then all of that small amount of ease is just going to get evenly distributed between the front and the back. Then I can close my sleeve inseam and simulate. And now I have a bodice and a sleeve. While her arms are out, you're going to see a little bit of pulling here, but once she relaxes her arms, she's also in a woven. But this is a really good place to start if you really need a basic bodice for a size that you don't have. That concludes this tutorial about making a bodice pattern. The pants will be shown in a follow-up tutorial. Thanks for watching.
Hello and welcome to the materials portion of the Beginner's Guide to CLO training series. In this video, I'll show you how to apply fabrics using CLO's fabric library, how to customize your own by using the property editor, as well as utilizing print layout mode. Don't forget, you could follow along this lesson by downloading the assets I use in this tutorial on Closette, which I'll link in the description below. So without further ado, let's get started. Every project file you work in will have a default fabric within the object browser. The default fabric doesn't have any particular set of physical properties, but rather is used more as a placeholder while constructing your projects. Once you build out a garment, for example, I'd recommend applying an actual fabric from the library to get a better idea of how that garment drapes in real life. There's a couple ways to apply fabrics in CLO. First, I'll navigate over to the library window and double-click on Fabric. Here you'll find the fabric library presets. There's currently 64 different kinds of fabric offered, with more available for purchase on CLO's marketplace. If you hover over them, an image will pop up showing how that particular fabric drapes, as well as some of its individual physical properties. The first way I'll demonstrate applying a fabric is by swapping out the current applied default fabric with a new one. To apply this cotton Oxford, for instance, I'll left-click and hold, then simply drag and drop it right over this fabric chip. Now that fabric is applied to all pattern pieces. Another way to apply fabric is by double-clicking one in the library. Some of you may get a pop-up information window that informs you that the fabric you selected was added to the object browser. I could see that my new fabric is added, however, it isn't applied to any patterns. I know that because this trash can icon only appears if the fabric isn't applied to anything. Some ways we can apply this fabric is by selecting a pattern in the 2D window and selecting this downward arrow here that reads Assign to Selected Patterns. By clicking that, it will apply to my selected pattern. This also works by selecting patterns within the 3D window and again assigning it to them. You can also drag and drop the fabric chip right on top of the patterns in both 3D and 2D windows. Let's say I want to apply this cotton gabardine. I can drag and drop that fabric from the library right on top of the garment. And I'll go ahead and apply it on the sleeves as well. So I now have different fabrications applied that are the same color. One way to differentiate which fabrics are applied to patterns is by selecting a fabric in the object browser. Doing that will illuminate the applied patterns in a yellow outline. Or you can select a pattern directly, and that applied fabric's name will change to blue. Also, don't let this checkmark throw you off. It doesn't indicate what fabric is applied, but rather is the last fabric you selected in the object browser. Just to demonstrate, I'll click on the cotton Oxford and select that same pattern piece. The cotton gabardine fabric still glows blue. An easy way to select all patterns with the same fabric applied is by right-clicking on it, and then go up to find Select All with Same Property, and select Fabric. That will select all the patterns so you can easily swap it out for another fabric. Notice that once I replace the cotton heavy twill with the cotton Oxford, I get that trash can icon that allows me to remove it, because it's no longer assigned to any patterns. As a best practice, try to keep your object browser organized and remove any additional fabrics that aren't being used so you can easily navigate the ones that are. Aside from applying existing fabrics, you can also add a new default fabric by clicking this Add button. You could customize a fabric by either starting from the default fabric or modify an existing one. This Copy button will duplicate whichever fabric you select. Copying is handy if you want to use the same fabrication, but use different colors. You would copy the fabric to retain its physical properties and recolor it, which I'll get into in a bit. So now that we've covered how to apply fabrics, let's go through how we could customize our own by using the property editor. You can access a fabric's properties by selecting the fabric, and it should populate right below here. If for whatever reason you don't see the property editor, it may be collapsed on the top right corner here. Also, you can always reset your layout by clicking this icon to get it back. I'll drag my window over a little bit so you can see the properties better. Starting from the top is Open and Save. This allows you to open any fabrics you saved prior and have the option to save any fabrics you've customized. Next is Name, and Classification below. If you expand that, you can see its fabric content. And next you have the Materials section. All of these different material properties I'm about to go through can be specified on the front, back, and side of the fabric. The first property is the material type. You can see all the different presets offered by expanding this downward arrow. These material types help express the type of material you're going for by changing the sheen, or in other words, how light reflects off that material. Selecting this silk satin will cause my fabric to appear much more shiny. There's everything from leather, metal, plastic, and some of these you'll notice say render only, meaning that you can only see the effects these material types have within the render engine. So by selecting glitter for instance, there aren't any noticeable changes within my 3D window. I'll go ahead and keep it on silk satin. Next down is basic parameters, starting with texture. The fabric's texture is made up of a textured image repeat. If I click on this 4 squared icon, I'll be directed to that texture's file location. Make sure if you're using your own textures that they're seamless repeats, or else you'll see harsh, visible repeats of that tiled texture. I'll show you an example of that once we get to applying prints later in this tutorial. Next is normal map. If you have used any other 3D software, this term might not be a new concept, but for everyone else, normal maps are images that help further express details, in this case on the fabric's texture. Expand normal map to find the intensity slider. This will adjust the strength of that applied normal map. When set at a positive value, it gives the illusion of the surface protruding outwards, whereas a negative value appears to sink in or have an embossed effect. Normal maps are important as they add more realism to your materials. Also, when it comes to lighting, normal maps help scatter light on the material's surface. Displacement maps are grayscale images that you can apply to actually add height to your textured surfaces by adding additional geometry to it. The white parts of the image will lift the surface, whereas anything in black will keep it at level, and the gray tones tend to be anything in between. Displacement maps are useful to express certain material types such as knits or sherpa. This particular fabric doesn't include one, but for a more detailed explanation using them, check out the graphics tutorial where I'll go over each of its parameters in depth. Below that is color. Click this white color chip to access the color window. Here you can either create your own colors and input any color codes. Any color you create can be saved and added to your own color palettes. The colors you add will appear below, which can also be renamed. Select these icons to either open or save out these palettes as an ACO file. And this icon changes how to view your colors. There's also this eyedropper tool that allows you to select any color, and works both inside or outside of the program. On the right side is an extensive Pantone color library, which is divided and organized by these separate tabs. If you want to add your own ACO or ACE color palette, click on this arrow until you get to the end of the tabs to find a little plus sign icon. Clicking that will give you the option to import your own. Opacity controls how transparent the fabric is. Lower the value on the slider to express any type of sheer or see-through materials. And reflection allows you to control the material types we went over earlier. The material